Today I'm going to walk you through the Resolution Diamond 101. The Resolution Diamond is a tool that I have created over roughly 10 years, and it incorporates the Stephen Karpman Drama Triangle, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, neurobiology, and the hero's journey as a way to become free from the effects of trauma, systemic oppression, and everything else that makes life a real bummer. So, in the beginning, we are pure love. That is the essence of who we all are. It's our natural state. It's what we're always trying to return to. And it's what we are separated from when something really scary or awful happens. In the late 1990s, Kaiser Permanente conducted a study called Adverse Childhood Experiences, and it's taken us roughly 20 years to begin adopting this knowledge and the work that they did as sort of common knowledge. ACEs or Adverse Childhood Experiences are sometimes called ACEs. They identified 10 categories of specifically childhood trauma that affects long-term health, social emotional health, and development. And the reason that childhood trauma is distinguished from trauma that we may experience as adults over the course of our lives has to do with our neurobiological development. So, I'm not a neurologist, but I'm going to draw this fantastic map or diagram of what's called the triune brain, which breaks our brain up into 3 different parts, and that will help us to understand this map. So when we are born, we start off with what I call our me brain or our brain stem. And the brain stem's primary function is survival. And so if you think about an infant, the only thing they're really concerned about is eat, sleep, poop, protect me, feed me, love me, take care of me from this big scary world. The human species, out of all species, living species, are the most vulnerable for the longest period of time in our development. And so that's in part why childhood trauma is distinguished from other kinds of trauma that we may experience. Where the ACE study was limited, and I do just want to say that Sojourner Truth was an abolitionist, a feminist, and a freed slave who was born in the late 1700s, and she said in the 1800s, it's the mind that makes the body. But we didn't listen to her until 2 privileged white men said it's the mind that makes the body. So, shout out to sister. What was limited in the original ACE study is things like systemic oppression and discrimination. So some trauma ends, and we know that some trauma does not end, that it continues, that we have to live in it, that we're kind of marinating in it. And so when we think about the world and looking at society, particularly Western society, through a trauma-informed lens, it's acknowledging the fact that while some traumas like parental divorce or sexual abuse or neglect may end in childhood, things like oppression and discrimination, I can't spell, but you get the idea. They don't end, right? We continue to live in it and with it, and that affects a lot of our behavior. But as we go through the diamond, I'm going to show you some possibilities for getting out of, getting free in spite of these factors. So, me brain, brainstem, survival, separated from love. According to Stephen, in the event after a trauma has ended, there are 3 primary ways that we play out or reenact that traumatic experience. So the effects of that traumatic experience. And those are the victim, the bully, and the rescuer. We've hurt those words in our society, and so in creating this map, I've changed the words because I don't like them, and they're not very kind, and they're not very helpful. When we feel shame for something, we're less likely to be willing to look at ourselves. And so by removing shame and acknowledging that this is part of natural healing, growth, and development, it makes it easier to approach it. and be kinder to ourselves and each other. So in our fight for love, one of the primary roles that we end up playing is what I call the VIP, or the very important persecuted. We were encultured to do this starting in the late 1930s with a little show called Queen for a Day, where a panel of 4 women would go on a show in front of a live studio audience and present their sad story. And the woman with the best sad story won cash and prizes and got all of her basic needs met. In one of the trainings that I did a couple of years ago, a counselor was retiring, and he said that his mother had gone on the show back when he was little to ask for a prosthetic leg for his father, who had lost it in the war. And so, and she didn't win. And so when we think about that show became wildly popular, not just because, well, anyhow, that show became wildly popular. It aired for over 30 years, and it kind of birthed this gross fascination with human suffering as entertainment, and a way to suffer to get basic needs met. So literally to become the biggest loser, which is sort of an inverted kind of Cinderella story in a very warped way. So what kind of a society do we live in that doesn't allow people legitimate access for meeting their basic needs when they actually have to go on a television show and humiliate themselves with their shame story in order to get basic medical care, or things like heat for their house, or washer and dryer, food, those kinds of things. So we've sort of been trained to play the very important persecuted as a way of surviving, as a way of getting our needs met. Bummer. Between the ages of birth, then, and puberty, we develop something that I call our we brain, which is our midbrain, our mammalian brain, our limbic system, and that's where all of our hormones live. So when we think about, again, trauma in relationship to attachment, this is where a lot of our attachment styles begin to develop across this energetic highway that I represent as a tug-of-war rope. So instead of playing bully or rescuer across this energetic highway, I like to think of it as trying too hard or too soft in the ultimate battle for love, because that's what we all want. Love, safety, security, efficacy, agency. We want to be able to be independent and be self-sufficient, and yet in the face of systemic oppression, in particular toxic capitalism, that becomes harder and harder to do. Same with discrimination, where if I'm not accepted as who I am in my society, and there's only one type of dominant culture that says this is the right way to be, and I'm not that, and I don't fit that mold, that's a form of trauma, again, that doesn't end. It doesn't come to an end. And so by playing this role of learned helplessness, it's almost by default. It doesn't become, it's almost not a choice. It becomes a way of having to live in order to put food on the table. And so when we are down here, operating from our brainstem and our limbic system, in response to trauma, our primary operating emotion is fear. We're scared. Who wouldn't be? Look at the world. It's kind of terrifying. So we find ourselves again in this tug of war, trying to feel safe and loved. In order to get out of this dynamic, again, that we shouldn't feel ashamed of, we need to access more and more our executive function, or what I like to call our C brain, being able to see the bigger picture. Aha, I get it, right? And unfortunately, what happens as a result of, specifically, I was just doing some research a couple of weeks ago on neglect. Our C brain, or executive function, consists of 2 hemispheres and something called our occipital lobes. And across the two hemispheres is something called the vermis, which is this worm-like median that actually develops scar tissue specifically in response to or as a result of neglect. Same with our occipital lobes. And with addiction, when we look at drugs, alcohol, all the different ways that we try to soothe ourselves and make ourselves feel safe, what we're doing is trying to fill the holes where love should be or should have been, but wasn't accessible for a number of reasons, right? So this full development of having our me, we, and C brains work together in harmony happens between birth and age 26. So our executive function isn't fully functional until we're 26 years old. So why are we giving 15-year-olds learning driver's permits? Like, that's a little crazy. Maybe we should rethink that. And trauma that happens at different points along this development can actually freeze us and stunt our growth in those particular areas. So while we may still have tentacles and like neural pathways that are developing from our brainstem up to our executive function, there can be other pathways that get kind of stuck and frozen. So if you've ever worked with addiction or yourself are an addict, you may find that parts of you are really functional and really mature and capable, and other parts of us may feel like that scared little kid, and that's in part why. And so what heals that scar tissue, what heals that damage from the traumatic experiences that we've had or continue to have? And this is where Maslow's hierarchy of needs comes in. And so just real quick, we know that we need ways, sustainable ways to meet our basic needs, to meet our needs for safety, our needs for love and belonging and acceptance in the community, which again, systemic oppression and discrimination, that's going to be a good trick. And then we need ways to sustain, establish and maintain a sense of self-worth and esteem in order to self-actualize, or what I call experience pathways to vastly infinite possibility. So the new VIP. So this is really just a transformation from learned helplessness and helplessness and fear and shame and finding power in our powerlessness to finding actual pathways to true power, right? So in spite of the world not changing, we can change. And how that happens is, one model in particular that I love, hi little bug, no thank you, is through the hero's journey, right? So we start in a place of vastly infinite possibility, connected to love, from a place of trust, which is our primary operating emotion when we're up here. We receive a call to adventure. We say no, I don't want to do that, it sounds scary. We meet mentors and friends who help us. We embark on a journey that's very difficult and scary, find ourselves in the belly of the whale, the pit of despair, Rocky montage our way up and out to get ready to face and fight our dragon. And again, for those of us with complex trauma, we can have many of them, lots of dragons to slay, and come up and through that to experience an ego death, which many of us are experiencing right now in this current awesome Mercury retrograde, July 7th through the 31st. It's been intense. And then come out in what Joseph Campbell referred to as the resurrection, or kind of rebirth, to see things, ourselves, each other, all the old problems in new ways, and give that gift back to the tribe, bring it back to the community, so hopefully they can share some of that wisdom. And then we start the cycle all over again. And this cycle, you can go through a hero's journey in the course of a day, a week, a month, a year, a lifetime, across multiple lifetimes. And then again, as a species, I believe we are collectively going through a hero's journey where we're trying really hard to understand ourselves and each other and find new ways of trusting the process of life, which sounds really easy, but it's not. So hopefully this map can be helpful. And so far it has been to roughly 2,000 people that I've trained it on over the last 3 years, and then back in the day when I used this with clients. So, and it continues to evolve, and every time I do it, it teaches us something new. And so hopefully I will do more of these videos and use it to explore a variety of topics and have a lot of fun doing it. Okay, so thanks. Resolution Diamond 101.